I would like, now you had lunch, now we're going to go from lunch into another fun topic, trauma. And we've been doing these little Zoom calls where we've all been getting to know each other. And I'm excited because Cherie, McKale, am I right? Is going to share with us next. And she's, the more I listen to her, the more I'm impressed. She sounds like a wonderful, great counselor. And so let's welcome Cherie.
Thank you, guys. Goodness, my picture's very big right there. So I just want to let you guys know a little bit about me. I have been a licensed mental health counselor for 6 years. I've seen hundreds of clients, hundreds and hundreds myself directly, and I've seen hundreds more through my role as a clinical supervisor up in the Federal Way area as I work with a practice up that way. And so I have a really deep passion for mental health. But long before, 6 years of practice, this passion of mine really started to take root about a decade ago when I, as a pastor's wife, I wasn't going to do this part, but here we are, ad-libbing. I went through my own struggle with, I had a baby, I had some hormonal stuff happen, and I really had a difficult time, and I really struggled with what I thought was a faith issue, and it was really a mental health issue. And just like Amy said, what's not helpful, there was a lot of like, well, if you just had more faith or if you prayed harder. And as a pastor's wife, I was really concerned about that. As a believer, I was concerned about that. But I was like, I don't know how to even show up because now people are disappointed. It was this whole thing. And I was like, God, something has to happen. And at that time, that's when I've been a believer for 40 years. And I have long since known that God wanted to move in me and to have a message for his people. And a decade ago, he put it in my heart to see mental health conversations in the church. And so that's why as soon as I heard about this, I was like, immediately, yes. And I called dibs on trauma, is literally what I said. I'm like, I love trauma. Let me do that one, right? And I'm going to tell you why. I promise I'm not like, maybe I'm a little weird. I'm a little weird. That is what it is. But I have a passion for it. And hopefully that comes across in this presentation. Like I said, I've been a believer for 40 years. I've been a women's ministry leader. I've been a worship director. I was a Christian musician for 12 years. I've been a pastor's wife. And now here I am with this passion of mental health in the church. So, like I mentioned yesterday, there's going to be a lot of information here, but we're really going to explore some of the biblical approaches of like, what does God say about all of this as well? Throughout my lifetime and experiencing working with people in all types of settings, I just truly believe that whether it's a business setting, a professional setting, a church setting, it doesn't matter, a family setting, if you sit with a person, you're sitting with a story of trauma. And there's not a lot of, some people are hesitant to accept that. I have clients who will say, no, I had a great childhood. My parents were great. And I'm like, I love that for you, right? And let's keep digging, right? Let's keep digging. So if you look at this next slide, it says, according to the National Council for Behavioral Health, 70% of adults in the United States have experienced at least one traumatic event. Something we know about stats is that they're not accurate. I am not currently a statistician. I am in school to be one, which is wild, but I disagree with this stat. I think it's 100%. I think it's 100%, and no one's been able to convince me otherwise. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about how you do have trauma. If you are not comfortable saying it yet, this presentation is going to help you get comfortable with sitting with it, and we're going to talk about why that's important. So I want to first just name, I know you guys are probably oversaturated with information right now. It's been a lot to absorb. It's kind of like a fire hose, and you're trying to keep up with it. And it's also a really vulnerable time. It takes courage. You guys, I want to say, just registering for this event was a seed of courage that you planted in yourself. Do not stop today. This is not part of my presentation, but don't stop today. This is not the end, this is the beginning. The seed that you planted by registering, continue to water that. Whether you reach out to resources, you have conversations, you do it in your time with God, don't forsake what you planted this weekend. This took courage. You deserve to have the fruit of that. So see it through to the end. So there's a lot of information, and it's only the starting point to clarify trauma. But I'm really hoping that each of you walks away feeling normalized, that it's not just in your head, you're not just making it up, that you walk away feeling that there's hope, that maybe there's something out there that can help you, right? And also understanding that trauma is not a faith issue. And we're going to talk about that more. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to cover, can we go back? We probably didn't put an objective slide in it. I'll tell you what we're doing today. We're going to cover defining trauma, naming trauma, identifying trauma, they're different, processing trauma, and then what does the Bible say about trauma? So that's what we're going to cover today, so you have a little bit of a roadmap. So what is trauma? Okay. Trauma is simply an emotional response to an event or a series of events that can have lasting negative effects on a person's well-being. We've heard about it all weekend. All roads lead to trauma, is what I say, which is why I feel really comfortable making up my own stat about 100% of us had trauma. If you're depressed, it's highly likely rooted in trauma. If you have anxiety, it's highly likely rooted in trauma. Suicidal ideation, issues you saw with Antoinette and Micah, where they said it was actually not always an us thing. I do this with couples work all the time. It's our individual traumas that we're bringing into our relationship, and now it's becoming an us thing, but if we do our own individual work, we're gonna do a little bit better together. It's one of my favorite things to do in couples work is to separate it and say, where are we getting it twisted, right? We gotta do that healing of ourselves, and once we can, we show up the way we want to, the way we were intended to in relationship. Right? So trauma can be experienced in many different ways. You can see this list. Individual trauma is an event that an individual experiences that may be harmful or threatening. This can include serious injury, death, accidents, major illness, or interpersonal violence. So this is stuff that is experienced on an individual level. Interpersonal trauma is the stuff that happens in relationship to other people, for better or worse, right? This can include adverse childhood traumas, events, abandonment, childhood maltreatment, domestic and sexual violence, right? All of the abuses that you can think of, because abuse is at the hands of another person, okay? So that's how we want to understand it. We're already broadening the idea of trauma here, right? Because this is a lot, right? Sexual violence, human trafficking, and elder abuse. These are big ones. These are big ticket ones. We want to validate those, but we're going to move into some more obscure traumas here in a second. Then there's collective trauma, and we're going to see a lot of this in our current socio-political climate right now, right? Collective trauma is trauma that we actually share as groups of people. It could be cultural, historical, social, political, on and on. It impacts individuals, communities, and it can be rooted in things like racism, bias, stigma, oppression, famine, epidemics, pandemics, and on and on. This is big stuff. And we're like, yeah, okay, that's the stuff I'm thinking of when I think of trauma, right? That's trauma. So I don't have any of those things. I don't know about you guys, but famine, I haven't been part of a famine, right? There's a lot of things on here that we're like, I don't relate to that. So we're gonna figure out, how does trauma then relate to me? So I like to break it down when I sit with my clients. Again, they're not comfortable yet naming that they have trauma. And I'm like, okay, stick with me, right? If you go to the emergency room and you're missing a limb, people will be like, that's trauma. You lost your arm in an accident. That's a major bodily trauma. But have you ever noticed, maybe you haven't, but I'm very nosy when a doctor writes something on my chart. I want to know what they write. And even if you get hit by, let's say a fly ball, and you have a contusion, a bruise, they write it down as a trauma to the skin. We're like, it's an injury. You can use whatever word makes you more comfortable, but it still needs to be treated, right? If you feel more comfortable saying, I have a relationship injury, We can start there, but first let's understand the macro trauma. Big T trauma, that's what I call it, big T trauma. That's the stuff we know. War and violence, right? We think of soldiers, PTSD. We think of those big ones, war and violence. Physical abuse, the same with sexual abuse, all of that stuff. Huge heavy hitters. Natural disasters, homelessness, hunger. Medical, these are injuries, illness, diagnoses, events. You think of like an emergency cesarean section. You think of an appendectomy. I'm talking like, people are like, oh, but those are run of the mill. It doesn't matter. It's still hard for people to process. I don't want to minimize trauma by saying we've all got trauma. You get a trauma, you get a trauma. I'm like Oprah Winfrey up here. You get one, who else wants one? I'm not minimizing trauma. I'm just saying we have it and we cannot address what we don't see. We cannot address what we don't name. We have to know to name it this, right? And so all of those big T traumas, assault, death, again, these ones we understand. But let's go into the micro traumas, the little T traumas. These are the ones that are a little stranger, right? The ones where we're like, I don't know if I can really call it trauma. Well, guess what? If you're gaslit, you've been convinced for a really long time that you're not being injured, that you're not being mistreated. So of course you're not going to know to call it trauma. You're like, well, I deserved it, or who knows? You can get lost in it, right? Emotional abuse is still trauma. Still trauma. Stick with me, right? Gaslighting, withholding emotions, emotional unavailability. If you've experienced that from a partner or a parent or a significant other, that can be a trauma. It's a relationship trauma. Psychological abuse, that's a doozy. I could have a whole entire breakout on that. Neglect or abandonment, this is parental and or relational. So this could be like, oh, I wasn't abandoned as a child, but were you abandoned as, I don't know, a 20-year-old in college, and you thought I was going to start this life with someone, and then they ran off with someone else, and then you kind of keep experiencing that same thing. Patterns of abandonment. Usually we're showing up in patterns. So when we're dealing with trauma, we're trying to figure out what's the pattern here? How can we interrupt it, especially if it's these little T traumas, these relational traumas. Neglect or abandonment, verbal abuse, name calling, yelling and screaming. And I'm not talking about like you're yelling and screaming. I mean, unless you need to. But if you are like if you experienced it, think of this as like a child. And you're like, my parents were always at each other, just screaming and name calling just constantly. But you know what? I don't do that, and it's fine because, I grew up, and once I turned 18, I was out of there. So I'm fine. And I don't agree with you. I'm not trying to make waves, but I'm just saying, if you're experiencing stuff in your life and that's part of your history, it's going to be connected. It's just there's no way for it to not be. There's no way for it to not be connected, you guys. Please hear me. Bullying, it's a big one. Face-to-face or online, doesn't matter. Take your pick. Bullying's a big one. That is trauma. That's connected, I think, to a lot of even the question about adolescents, adults too, but adolescents especially, so vulnerable to bullying. And if you're looking at some SI risk, that's a huge one. So let's not minimize this. I call it micro T because it helps people get a little bit more comfortable with naming it trauma, but they are not small, and they are not, it's like, oh, little T trauma affects us less than. No, that's not what's happening here. It's that we're just not used to them, and we're not as conditioned to accept them as traumas. So we're trying to change this. Okay, last is called vicarious trauma. It's borrowed, or like I say, like an invisible trauma. Stuff that we don't know we even have the right to have trauma around. We're like, that wasn't my trauma. Okay, but are you a therapist who hears about sexual violence all the time, who's heard about someone's, abusive past, and they're telling these egregious stories over and over again? Maybe you do just like clinical evaluations. You don't even get to sit and see the healing. You just hear the trauma stories over and over and over. Teachers, watching these kids come in that aren't being fed, that are being neglected, whose parents don't care, and there's nothing you could do. You think that's not traumatizing? And if you don't think you can't own that, you're carrying that. And it affects us. It gets into our psyche. It gets into our spirit. and we just get dejected. That increases our sense of hopelessness. You think teachers and nurses and ministers don't feel hopeless when they're like, there's nothing more I can do to help these people? Like Dr. Jance was saying, they come in, they're like, you're my last hope, and you're like, oh my gosh. I don't know how many times I have to, like I said, I'm a clinical supervisor. I have 7 interns who are lucky enough to sit under my tutelage. And they're suicidal ideation. I know this is not my breakout, but I can't steal from you because you already went, Amy. They're so worried. They're like, I heard a question. How do we assure that we can keep them safe? And you can't. You can't assure that you're going to keep someone safe. Right? And so when you are a minister or a therapist or a teacher, and like Amy says, she'll check in with a student, and then that dreadful day where someone, no matter how much we step into someone's life, they still decide this world's not for me. You don't think that's traumatic? I sure hope it is. That's not me being mean. This should affect us. So then if it does, then what are we going to do with it? First responders, police, missionaries, come on now. If you've been outside of this country, it's jarring. It's what you see, right? Crises workers and military, non-combat, I'm talking non-combat military, who have to see the way like women and children are treated in other countries. They have to witness what they can't affect, and they just have to sit there and kind of like play nice. There's so many different ways trauma gets us, and people don't know that they have a right to say, I have trauma. I think there's a lot of stigma around trauma, and I don't think it's so much about the fact that people are embarrassed. I think that there's almost like I'm not gonna say trauma because I feel like that's a catchword, and everybody apparently has trauma, and if everyone has trauma, and so there's kind of like this almost disregard, like, oh, I'm not gonna say trauma because it's just like a buzzword, right? And I'm gonna seem ridiculous if I walk in and I say, well, I have trauma, and then everyone's gonna think that I'm silly, but we still have it. All of us have it, right? So getting comfortable with this isn't a matter of you not being strong enough or capable. This is about the fact that when we interact with people and this kind of stuff happens, this is our response. This is our brain. This is what it does. So what do we do about that? And so these are the different types, right? So why is it important to define trauma? Okay, this is kind of like the point and purpose of this presentation. One, so that you know what you're experiencing. If you're living life and you're like, I don't know why I'm gonna steal from all of the presentations because you guys are brilliant. If you're fighting with your spouse and you're like, I don't know why, like I'm really bad at relationships, right? I always pick all toxic people, and it's always them. Maybe, most likely, because we all have trauma, but is there stuff in here too? Right? If you're depressed, you just can't, and everyone's like, can't you just see like how good you are? Can't you see the hope and the purpose of your life? And you're like, I can't. Like, why am I so broken? Why am I so broken? Why can't I get over this? And then here we go into a shame spiral. I'm not strong enough. I don't understand. Like, it's because you may not. It's unresolved trauma, very likely. I can't diagnose people who are not right in front of me as a client, so I cannot for sure say that. But after our list, it's highly likely that you have some undiagnosed or unidentified trauma. So you can know what you're experiencing. You cannot address something that you cannot name. Something that's not identified. People think, why do I have to identify my emotions? Well, like Dr. Jance said, if you don't understand that you're angry, how can you actually treat the anger? That doesn't make any sense, right? If you're like, I don't think it's important for me to call it trauma, well, then you're not going to go through the work that trauma requires to process, right? It'd be like saying, oh, I have, the doctor said that I have diabetes, and so I went over here and I took the medication for cancer, and I'm just going to assume it's going to do the same thing. Or, I have cancer, so I thought, I'll take ibuprofen, right? And it's like, well, it's medicine, right? No, like you need the treatment for the issue, right? So if it's trauma, we gotta name it, right? Otherwise, you might continue to think there's something wrong with you. And that's what I was talking about, like, why can't I just do this? If it's trauma, you can't just get over it. It's not just mind over matter. It's big. This stuff can go back a long ways. And if I had time, and if you were my client, we would be digging into your past. It would be really fun. We'd be talking about all kinds of childhood stuff. It'd be great. But it's going to go way back there. And the deeper it goes, the further back it goes, the harder it is for us to work through it. The first thing people ask me when they come to therapy is like, how long is this going to take? And I say, how old are you? And they're like, and I'm like, I'm not kidding. I really wish I was kidding. Like, how far back are we going to take this? It could go way back. People are like, well, but it's about my marriage. Yeah. But as we've heard this weekend, the way we show up in our marriage was probably the way we show up in our friendships, probably the way that we show up at work. I always tell people, you are Dr. Jantz, the same Dr. Jantz with friends, family, colleagues, clients, just varying levels of intimacy or knowing. Right? We show up in varying levels of, do you know who I am on these levels? But I'm the same person. I'm carrying the same issues in each relationship over and over and over and over again. If it's healthy, fantastic. If it's trauma, you can see the problem with that over and over and over again. I'm relating from my trauma. We're going to get into that. You may begin to question your faith. Kind of like my testimony at the beginning where I said, I thought there was something wrong with me, right? Because people, well-meaning people, they'll throw scripture at you and say, well, because God can heal, and so you got to pray. And you're like, I am praying. I thought I was praying. I thought I had faith as small as a mustard seed. Like, I don't understand then why it's not working. Is that a me thing? Does Jesus even care? Does he hear me? Now we're getting it twisted. Right? We've got stuff we got to deal with. God is the ultimate healer, and he gives us with these resources, these tools, and we're in relationship. It's a result of the fall. It's a sinfulness of man, and that is why we have to heal. We got to deal with this stuff. So if we don't do this, we're not going to be able to process our grief. A lot of trauma is connected to loss of something, loss of sense of self, loss of a loved one, loss of a job, loss of expectations. I know you feel like you're getting a little, no, anything where you're like, I thought it was going to be like this, and then something happened and it completely flipped, and now I'm grieving, and that grieving stays, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and now all of a sudden we're starting to show up in relationships in ways that's injurious to ourselves and others, and we're starting to cause relationship injuries and traumas because we experienced something way back then in our childhood or young adulthood that's preventing us from processing this well. What is it? That's a lot to try to do on your own. Right? And so, can you do it on your own? We're going to go into that. Many people can. I'm not sitting up here saying you have to have a therapist. There's times when you can do this on your own. God equips us. And there's times you might want to reach out for help, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's look at some common emotional and physical symptoms of trauma. I wish I had bullet pointed this, but I'm a writer, so you get my paragraphs. I'm really sorry. Trauma can affect your sense of safety, your sense of self, your ability to regulate your emotions. So think of yourself as vacillating and you just don't know why. Like they were talking about high irritability, tearfulness, panic, anxiety. You can't really figure it right, inability to regulate. People who experience trauma may feel shame, helplessness, powerlessness. This is a heavy list. Intense fear, panic attacks, flashbacks, re-remembering, irritability, anxiety, depression, dissociation, depersonalization, and intrusive thoughts. You ever just feel like you're just kind of like wandering through your day and you're like, I don't even know how I got here. Like I just finished it. Like I don't even know. Like I woke up, people were talking to me, but I was just disengaged. Sometimes it's because we're exhausted and we didn't have enough coffee. Sometimes we see that this is happening all the time and I just I'm checked out, right? And people think, oh no, it's depression. It could be depression as a result of a trauma that we're not addressing, right? So again, we got to look at the whole picture here. What might it be? Because the last thing you want to do is go into your doctor and say, I'm having anxiety or panic attacks, or I have no motivation and I just don't even see the meaning of life. And then you get medication. I'm not here knocking medication. It has a time and a place. But if we're medicating depression and anxiety, but we're not processing trauma, What happens when that medication stops? What happens when that medication just isn't enough? Medication cannot heal trauma because it's relationship. Trauma is broken relationship, okay? There's no amount of medicine that can fix that, okay? So what else can trauma, physical symptoms such as an upset stomach, right? Trouble sleeping, pounding heart. This all feels familiar, right? When we think about trauma, we think about these things. Rapid breathing, feeling shaky, restless, troubled concentrating. All of this would be really hopeless, right? You don't have to experience all of it, but if you're like, that list feels a little familiar to me sometimes, right? And we can go through seasons where maybe we're like, I'm not having that so much now, but I remember feeling some of that. It might be an indicator that you need to look into some stuff, because like I said, 100% of us have a trauma of some sort. So what is it that God brought you here to look at, to examine? That's for you to know and for him to have that conversation with you. But what's that unhealed piece in there? Ask God. It takes courage, but ask him. He'll show you. So how else might trauma show up? This one's tricky. So, but you know what? At first I thought, I don't know if people are really going to like track with this, but then Micah and Antoinette did their thing, and I'm like, oh, thank you, because yes, here we go. Trauma might show up in problems in relationships. This happens all the time. Maybe you have difficulty trusting people or maintaining connections with others. And I'm not just talking about like, I don't like that person. Like a one-off's fine, guys. We can't like everybody. But if you're just like, I just can't. I don't know. And every time I do, and it always gets broken, it always gets messed up. You might have some unresolved trauma in there, right? Maybe you have insecure or anxious or avoidant type of attachment styles with people. Again, attachment styles is a completely different subject that goes back into childhood, but I won't geek out on that. But maybe you feel avoidant or anxious or insecure. That is going to be related to trauma. I can almost guarantee it. Maybe you have clinginess or codependency, trauma. Hyper-independence, you thought I wasn't going to see you, didn't you? You're like, I'm not clingy. I'm not codependent. Are you hyper-independent? You're like, I don't need nobody. Like, I got this. That's a trauma response. We just like to really flip it as a strength in this country because we're an individualized society. And we're like, I'm a rock, I'm an island. Like, I got this. And it's like, who hurt you? Right? Who hurt you? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm not broken. I'm not none of this. Like, I'm not saying that correlation's not always causation. Just because someone says that doesn't mean that there's trauma, but it's linked a lot, right? So don't just think that this is something that's like meek and no, if you're like hyper independent, you're like, I got this, nothing can shake me. It can be a coping skill, but it could also be a coping mechanism. And those are very different things, right? So, negative self-beliefs and internalized shame. Okay, what do you believe about yourself? You learn that really early. That's trauma, right? If you learn something about like, I'm stupid, I'm incompetent, I'm not enough. You didn't learn that at 22 for the first time, guaranteed. It started somewhere else. It started much early. Okay, Cherie, but why are we talking about this? Because that's trauma. It's not just the big T stuff that we talked about. It's this stuff. This is the stuff. Most of us, praise God, are not going to have to deal with a lot of those big T traumas, but every single one of us has had to navigate those little ones. That's just a fact of life, right? So negative self-beliefs, internalized shame. Shame spirals are wild. It's not just guilt. I tell my clients, there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt might be fitting. If you're like, I didn't do those emails like I was supposed to, and I feel guilty, I'm like, you should probably do those emails then, right? I didn't turn in my homework I know I was supposed to, and I went out to the movies instead. Who am I talking to? And I feel guilty. Everyone's feeling called out, all the college students. How did she know? Girl, I was there. I feel guilty. Good. You should feel guilty. If you're like, I didn't do it and I'm such a bad employee, everyone's gonna find me out, my boss is probably mad at me, and this is always happening, and I probably don't even belong in this job, and this is a shame spiral. That's different. That's a core belief. That's not guilt. Guilt is actionable. You got something you need to change, do it. Shame, that'll stop you cold. It keeps you immobilized, incapacitated. That's connected to trauma, okay? I need to speed this up. Here I didn't think I was gonna have enough stuff to say, and I'm like, oh, I can vamp, I'll fill it in. Affect dysregulation, it's that same thing. Difficulty controlling emotions. Addictive behaviors, we've heard a lot about that. Think of that as coping mechanisms, right? Same thing, we're just trying to cover it up because we don't really want to deal with it. Coping mechanisms. Anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, we've got all of that as well. Triggers. Triggers are a tricky thing. Triggers are when our bodies perceive a current stressor, right, that's happening right now, as threats, and it's activating the same stress response that was experienced in the face of the original trauma, right? Micah and Antoinette, you did a beautiful job setting this up. We planned it like this, guys. So what happens? You're like, oh my gosh, my husband's talking to me like he's a commanding officer and he's yelling at me and I remember all this. And so that full weight of all of that is gonna go on to that person and they're thinking, what is up? What just happened? And you're like, danger. I have got to fight it, or I've got to run away, or I've got to X, Y, and Z. And it was this full wave of trauma that came over and complicated the interaction with this person right here. Maybe they're dangerous. I don't know if I'm a suspicious person or I play it safe. I always tell clients, I'm like, don't throw it all out. Trust your instincts. Trust what you've learned. That person could be dangerous. They could be toxic, but we don't know yet. Check with yourself. Pause and process. I tell everyone, in between stimulus and response, there is space. Space to figure out what's coming up for me. Is this real time? Is this person a real threat? Use your logic there. I'm looking at them. Are they a real threat? Thanks, intuition, and head out. Or is this my trauma coming up, and now I'm making this an us problem when really it's something I gotta work on? And you're gonna start to break the pattern, right? And like I said, unidentified and unprocessed grief. The same thing, it masquerades, right? It masquerades, it hides. So how might you work through your trauma on your own? There's many ways to do that on your own. So like I said, it's good news. I'm not out here soliciting new clients, right? You gotta go to a counselor. We're all like in cahoots together. You can work through it on your own. What can you do? You can talk with someone. You can talk to a trusted friend or family member, support group, someone at church. The emphasis is, though, on a trusted and safe person. Be careful who you give your ear to for counsel. It doesn't have to be an official counselor, but the second you let people speak into your life, it starts to take root. You gotta be careful what you expose yourself to, guys. Just be mindful about it, right? Who do you surround yourself with? And if you are in a space in life, and a time, a season in life where you're like, most of my friends are toxic, start with just one person and be selective about who gets to see your heart and who gets to hear your information and start to heal, right? Be selective. You can practice self-care. You could try to eat well. There's lots that Dr. Jantz told us about that isn't just mental health, our physical. It's so true. I love that you brought that up. It's a whole person. I always tell my clients, what's your spiritual life like? What's your physical health like? What's your mental, i.e. your cognitive self, and then your emotional self, right? Because it all has to, if you think of it like an equalizer, if one is off, they're all going to be off. We have to pay attention to the whole person because it all affects. If you're low on your quiet time and prayer life, you don't think that's going to affect your mental health? And like we saw, our mental health can affect our physical health. And now we don't know what's going on. We're like, I'm a complete mess, right? So what should I do? Should I go to therapy? Yeah, and a nutritionist and to church. Do all of it, right? Go to therapy, go to the doctor, go to church, tend to all of it, right? Practice self-care. You can also get enough sleep. You can exercise. You can implement relaxation techniques. This is stuff that we know. It's simple. Like Dr. Jantz said, it's simple. But the thing about simple is that simple is not always easy. Give yourself grace. These are simple. I'm not going to share anything up here that's going to be earth-shattering. You're like, what? I never even thought about that. This is simple, but simple can still be hard. Okay? You can maintain your routines. Try to stick with your normal routines as much as possible. Don't make any drastic goals, set realistic goals. Don't do anything drastic until your wellness has increased. Try to stay present. Don't go flitting off into the future because that's running. That's a sign that you're running from something. Not always. Maybe you just have really great plans, right? But if you are just like, I don't know, I have this compulsion to just like go, like, you know what, if I just like quit this school and I drop out of this and I go over here, everything's gonna be better, right? How many of us have said that, right? That's maybe, but heal your trauma along the way, otherwise you're just gonna carry it with you, right? It's gonna keep, like everywhere I go, people are, I'm like, everywhere you go, people are? I'm just saying, right? I'm not saying, I'm just saying, right? What's the common denominator, right? My clients love it when I say that. I'm like, interesting. I'm just wondering, like, what's always in every relationship? Me. I'm very careful with that. I gave you guys that one. I'm very careful. I do not believe in victim blaming or shaming, right? If there's a story where that is not necessarily true, I would not fling that one out. So that's on a case-by-case basis, but a lot of times we're just perpetuating a pattern. We are teaching people how to treat us based on our trauma, and we show up in relationships, and we just cannot figure out, how can I get healthy people around me? Let's look at your trauma. What's up? Because we can't control them. We can't control anybody but ourselves. And if you're like, I don't know what else to do, let's look at ourselves. Not because we are to blame, but we are to heal. Right? So let's look at ourselves and heal and see what kind of difference it makes when we show up in these spaces. And lastly, just be patient with yourself. Like I said, it's normal to want to avoid to talk about the trauma. Maybe you're not ready yet, and that is okay, but too much avoidance, right, for too long can prolong your stress and delay your healing. So, like I said, many people recover from trauma on their own over time, but there may be times when it might be helpful to seek the help of a mental health professional, which is why we have resourced you guys to no end. And there are tables out there because, again, this is just the beginning of this conversation. This is not the end at all. This is just the beginning. So if you need help, get help, right? When might you want to reach out for help? I am way down on time. When might you want to reach out for help? If you find yourself avoiding certain places or activities, if you feel that you want to avoid thoughts by staying busy, that's with like events and activities or work, like who knows? If you find yourself unable or unwilling to examine your feelings, if you have intrusive thoughts, memories, flashbacks, nightmares, if you find yourself easily triggered, hypervigilant, always looking out, always suspecting, always suspicious, what's everyone's angle, what are they up to? Panic attacks, severe emotional responses. If you find yourself self-medicating, we've heard a lot about that with substances to cope. Not just substances, anything that's addictive. If you feel helpless and hopeless, uncertain, the list goes on. And just so you know, you'll get these slides as well, so no stresses. So if you find that you're suffering or struggling with those, that might be a sign that you need to reach out for extra help, okay? There's some snapshots about trauma-informed therapy approaches, about what a therapist, kind of breaking down. Some people are afraid to go to therapy. They're like, I don't know what kind of magic voodoo they're going to do on me. That feels really weird in there. I'm not sure. This is a breakdown of what therapists that are good therapists, like Dr. Jantz said, that are quality therapists. This is an example, a snapshot of what you could expect to find in therapy. I don't want to go over it because I want to get into what the Bible says about trauma. So this will be on your slides. What does the Bible say about trauma? Experiencing trauma and having difficulty processing trauma, like I said, is not a lack of faith, and it absolutely is not reflective of God's love for you. It's just not it. It's not it at all. And if you're like, I don't know, if there's one thing I could tell you today, I'm going to tell you that part. It just isn't indicative of his love for you. Okay, the Bible offers insight into trauma by acknowledging the reality of suffering and pain, and it presents God as a source of comfort and healing. So even though psychology is not in the Bible, it's in the Bible, right? God understands suffering. Scripture's filled with stories of individuals experiencing significant hardship and trauma, demonstrating that God is aware of human pain and does not shy away from it. God is a refuge. I'm gonna hurry this up. God is a refuge. The Psalms frequently portray God as a safe haven for those who are broken and hurting and offering comfort and strength in times of distress. Look in the book of Psalms. I won't read all of these, but it's beautiful. And it's always speaking to the pain that people are going through. And you can pray these over for yourself. It gives you words when perhaps you don't have words. You're like, I don't even know what to pray. The Psalms are beautiful examples of how God is close to the brokenhearted, how he preserves us and reaches in when we have a crushed and broken spirit. God doesn't not care, guys. The world wants to convince us he doesn't. The Bible is like, where? Where did I say that? Where did I ever say that? Well, I don't know. Well, open it. Because if you think God doesn't care, you have not opened it. You got to open it, okay? Jesus is the ultimate healer. He himself experienced significant suffering, which allows him to empathize with human pain. He's a suffering servant, and he offers hope of healing and restoration. Isaiah talks about that. He was despised and rejected, a man of suffering, familiar with pain, not unfamiliar. He didn't sit on a golden throne going, oh, that looks really hard. See you in heaven. No, he was familiar with pain. There's plenty of examples in that. The Bible talks about how healing through reliance on God, and it encourages us to turn to him for support and strength when facing trauma. Turn to him, right? Find solace in his presence and promise. So how can we process trauma biblically? I'm going to roll through this because I'm 2 minutes over time, and here I was afraid I wouldn't have enough information for you guys. I'm going to go. All right, so how can we process it biblically? I really want to get to this biblical stuff. This is important, okay? Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers and sisters, I'm going to read this, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable. If there's any moral excellence and if there's anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. Where do you fix your mind? If there's one thing the Bible talks to you over and over and over and over again, it's mindfulness. I don't know where we got such a weird feeling with that word, like mindfulness. That sounds spooky. And I'm like, the Bible says to do it. The world ripped the Bible off constantly. And this was God's idea. Engaging with God through mindfulness is suggested to people recovering from trauma all the time. What are you fixing your mind on? Think of these things. Are you ruminating? Resenting? We go down. We reflect. That's weird. We ruminate. We start to resent people, and we get hooked down in there, right? Be mindful. Journaling. We talked about journaling. Dr. Jans talked about journaling. The thing I love about journaling is that it's a testimony of God's goodness. I love to look back and go, oh, that's what you brought me through. I needed to be reminded of that. We have short-term memory loss, you guys. We're like, oh, here's just like the Israelites. We're like, oh, how are those Israelites like that all the time? We do that every time, right? Where we're like, I forgot God's goodness. He's abandoned me. And we're like, look back in your journal as a testament to God has had you every step of the way. We need to be reminded, not because we're ridiculous, but because we're human. And life is hard. And God didn't expect us to remember it. He gave us pen and paper. I'm just kidding. We had to invent that. But he knew we were going to invent it one day. And now digital stuff, he's like, they'll write it down. They'll remember it, right? Well, don't get me twisted. Once upon a time, it was all about word of mouth. We would talk about this. We would talk about testimony and how God worked. And now we don't do it so much, so we got to write our own little journals so that we can remind ourselves. That's fine. Maybe not the original design, but it's going to work because it'll remind us. Laments, talked about it, such as those in Psalms. It's an opportunity to pour out your pain before the Lord and express your honest confusion, your hurt, your anger, your anguish, all of that. He's a big God. He can take it. Don't be scared to let it open because it won't just reabsorb into your body. You got to let it out. And God's like, I got you. Let it out. I'm a big God. I can hold it, right? So maybe you're not ready to open up to someone else. That's fine. Open up to him. See what you can do, right? Defining, identifying, process, and healing your trauma will help you remember, or perhaps if you're here today, it'll help you discover your identity as God's beloved child and equip you to work towards the fullness of life in Jesus Christ. That's why we heal our trauma, so we're not stuck, so that we're not, why are we even here? We have a purpose, so let's heal so we can continue forward in it. Thank you guys so much. You'll get the slides. Thank you.